The subcommittee will come to order. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today to discuss the Farm Production and Conservation FY25 budget request and priorities for the upcoming year. I'd like to welcome and introduce today's witnesses. Robert Bonney is the Undersecretary for the Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area at USDA. While we'll only hear testimony from Undersecretary Bonney, I want to thank the Farm Service Agency Administrator Ducheneau, Risk Management Agency Administrator Bunger, and Natural Resource and Conservation Chief Crosby for being here to answer questions from the subcommittee members. I'm hopeful we can have an informative and productive conversation. In the FY25 President's budget, the FPAC mission area requested a total of $2.63 billion, $156 million, or 6.3% increase over FY24 enacted levels. The agencies under FPAC, the Farm Service Agency, the Risk Management Agency, and Natural Resource Conservation Service, are the Department of Agriculture's primary customer service-oriented agencies for our producers. With offices located in nearly every county in America, the field staff for FSA and NRCS are tasked with delivering critical farm, loan, and conservation programs directly to farmers. RMA oversees the Federal Crop Insurance Program, one of the most important risk management tools available to producers. Each year, farmers in Maryland depend on your agencies to deliver these programs in a manner that is timely, effective, and fair. I appreciate the work of the thousands of on-the-ground county and regional office staff working directly with producers to administer farm programs. However, I am concerned about decisions being made here in Washington, D.C. at the top of these agencies. Rather than focusing on the agency's respective core missions, this administration's social and political agenda continues to be injected into programs under your jurisdiction. On disaster assistance, USDA decided, without direction from Congress, to waive the crop insurance premiums only for, quote, socially disadvantaged farmers under the 2022 Emergency Relief Program. It should go without saying, when natural disasters strike, Mother Nature doesn't discriminate based on a farmer's race or gender, and neither should our federal disaster response. As a result of USDA basing disaster assistance on factors such as race and gender, USDA is once again being sued by farmers in federal court for violating the Equal Protection Clause under our Constitution. Under the Biden administration, USDA has also spent millions of taxpayer dollars to support NRCS equity agreements. FSA has canceled farm loans for select, again, quotes, distressed borrowers, and the department has employed third-party entities to disperse payments to any producer who claims he or she has been discriminated against. Each of these initiatives departs from the agency's core missions of delivering farm bill programs and disaster assistance in a fair and nonpartisan manner. As you know, the average age of a U.S. farmer has risen to 58. Less than 2% of the population chooses to go into farming or ranching as their occupation. 97% of farms are family farms, and 12% of farms are responsible for over 80% of our agricultural production. We're blessed in this country that we can enjoy the fruits of their labor with a safe and abundant food supply. We can also have other careers thanks to the American farmer. But being a producer is a minority occupation in this country, so USDA should be focused on helping all producers because this country depends on all producers, regardless of race, gender, big, small, organic, conventional. All of our farmers feed America. That's why so many find it frustrating when this administration is picking and choosing winners and losers when we need all producers to be successful, unless we want to depend on China and other countries for our food. I'm also concerned about the use of the Commodity Credit Corporation as a slush fund to create new, unauthorized programs. Under the agencies here today, the $3.5 billion spent on partnerships for climate-smart commodities stands out as an egregious misuse of the CCC. It is the role of the legislative branch, for Congress, to enact laws that establish new programs, not the executive branch to use the CCC to fund pet projects. I do expect to hear about staffing challenges across each of the agencies today. So I want to say up front, if staff shortages are a problem, it stands to reason that the current staff should be solely focused on the core mission of serving farmers, instead of being asked to implement unauthorized programs under the CCC or to advance the administration's political agenda. In other words, USDA should simply carry out programs authorized by Congress and in a manner intended by Congress. Once again, thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to today's discussion. Ranking Member Bishop, I'll now yield to you for any opening remarks you'd like to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. And I want to thank each of the witnesses for being with us today, and thank you for your public service. Undersecretary Bonnie has almost as much time at USDA as Secretary of FPAC. Chief Cosby started his career as an intern at NRCS and has served there for more than 40 years. FSA Administrator Doshino has been administrator since the beginning of the administration, on top of his work at the Intertribal Agriculture Council. And RMA Administrator Bunger, you have been administrator since the beginning of the administration, on top of the work at the Intertribal Agriculture Council, and 25 years of experience with FSA, which means that you know firsthand the importance of crop insurance to producers. So I'm thrilled to see all of you here, and I want to make sure that my colleagues are aware of some of the very impressive achievements in your missionary in 2023. You've had some tremendous successes. You cut the FSA loan application from 10 loan-related forms totaling 29 pages to a single form totaling 13 pages, dramatically reducing the time that it takes to apply for a loan. NRCS has a new expedited application process called Act Now, used by the agency to immediately approve and obligate funds for the major conservation programs such as CSP and EQIP. You've overseen tremendous growth in livestock insurance participation. To date, you've provided assistance to 42,000 producers who were behind on their FSA loans from the 22006 program that last year's House bill would have slashed. You administered a record $207 billion in crop insurance in 2023. This is extraordinary. I congratulate you for a job well done. So thank you for being here today and look forward to your testimony. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I'd now like to recognize Mr. Bonney for his opening statement, and without objection, your entire written testimony will be included in the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Bishop, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. As Secretary for Farm Production and Conservation, I have the honor to work with USDA's producer-facing agencies as we partner with farmers, ranchers, and forest owners to strengthen American agriculture. American agriculture is the backbone of our nation's economy, generating over $1 trillion annually. Yet our producers face significant challenges from unpredictable weather, volatile markets to supply chain bottlenecks and stubborn input costs. Strengthening the agricultural safety net is at the core of what FPAC does. In 2023, the Risk Management Agency administered a record $207 billion in crop insurance protection for American agriculture across 540 million acres. President Biden has fully funded crop insurance in every budget. New innovations such as hurricane insurance, whole farm revenue protection, expanded double cropping, and incentives for cover crops allow us to serve more producers in more places. We're particularly proud of expanded insurance opportunities for livestock producers. FSA has delivered more than $16.9 billion in farm programs and farm loans throughout FY23, including $5.3 billion through its standing disaster programs, $1.2 billion to dairy producers through the Dairy Margin Coverage Program, and $2.4 billion through our emergency relief and emergency livestock relief programs. FSA's farm loan programs provide a critical source of credit to producers who may not have access to commercial lenders. With resources from the Inflation Reduction Act, we have distributed approximately $2.3 billion to more than 42,000 financially distressed farmers and ranchers, helping them stay in agriculture. The President's budget identifies actions to provide greater flexibility and access to capital, ensuring more producers can continue to access financing and keep farming for generations to come. FPAC strives to serve all farmers and ranchers. That means ensuring that our programs cover all crops, livestock, and geographies, that our programs work for all producers, large and small, and that we provide outreach and assistance to historically underserved producers, veterans, women, tribes, and others. Through our Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovation Production, FPAC is working to serve urban, small-scale, and controlled environment agriculture through new programs and partnerships. FPAC has established 17 new urban service centers and created 10 new urban county committees to administer FSA programs in urban areas. In 2023, NRCS enrolled more farmers and more acres in voluntary conservation programs than ever before, thanks in large part to the IRA's historic investment, $19.5 billion in climate-smart agriculture and forestry. Our approach to climate-smart agriculture is voluntary, incentive-based, collaborative, and rewards producers for their stewardship. NRCS successfully obligated 99.8% of all FY23 IRA funds and invested over $2.8 billion in conservation assistance through more than 45,000 contracts. FSA's Conservation Reserve Program remains very popular, with more than 24.7 million acres enrolled. Through the general sign-up and targeted enrollments, we expect to hit the 27 million acre cap this year. Meaningful conservation on the ground requires the personnel and partners to design conservation practices, and our budget supports these investments. FPAC has made major steps in making participation in our programs less burdensome. FSA has substantially reduced the size of its loan application, while NRCS has simplified the application and enrollment for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program and other programs. The FPAC Business Center provides mission support services, enabling us to deliver programs for producers more efficiently. Work by the Business Center has allowed NRCS to increase overall hiring by 35% and decrease separations by 28% in FY23. Recruitment and retention of staff remain critical. We continue to look for ways to provide competitive pay, opportunities for professional growth, and a rewarding work environment for our 22,000 employees. The FPAC budget presented to you reflects the vital importance of delivering programs effectively, equitably, and in a way that supports farmers, ranchers, and forest owners for generations to come. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonney, and I'll defer my questions till the end, so I want to recognize Mr. Bishop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bonney, you said in your testimony that in 2023, NRCS has increased hiring by 35% and decreased separations by 28%. This is fantastic. But you say you're struggling in FSA. Can you tell us why there might be a difference between the two agencies? In 2023, you implemented a retention initiative for SSA that set aside funds for student loan repayments for employees who agreed to 3-year service agreements. Do you have any results to share with us on that initiative? Briefly, sir.
Mr. Bishop, thank you for the question. It's a really important issue. We have, as you noted, instituted a retention bonus last year. We're looking at ways now that we can increase salaries going forward. Our challenge in a lot of those rural offices is we're competing with private sector to retain and recruit employees. We think the retention bonus has worked well. We think we've got to build on it as we move forward.
I was struck, thank you for that. I was struck by the attention that you gave to the Business Center in your testimony. It's certainly not a sexy part of what you do, but it is essential. This resonates with me because as chairman of the subcommittee, I worked with former Secretary Perdue to ensure that the buildings that house USD employees in D.C. were maintained and renovated as the budget requested. I provided funding for the federal pay raise every year. And I'm sorry to say that the 2024 bill that came out of the subcommittee did not provide the pay raise funding or adequate funds for USDA buildings and facilities account. The House Democratic corner of the subcommittee's four corners begged and pleaded for this essential funding to no avail. In the hope that my colleagues will better understand, would you discuss what adjustments you're having to make this year to absorb the unfunded 5.2% pay raise that accompanied the budget?
The budget in the Business Center is very tight. We don't think we're going to have to let anybody off or riff anybody, but it is forcing us to make choices. As you point out, the Business Center plays a vital role in helping us administer grants and agreements, in dealing with hundreds of leases across the country, and in a variety of ways. They support all of us with human resources and otherwise. And it's the engine that backs a lot of the producer-facing work we do. So critical issues there. Budgets are tight. We'll make do with what we have.
Thank you. In FY23, USDA provided $70 million for equity agreements to expand access to NRCS services to previously underserved communities. The budget requests this year $30 million for this effort in fiscal 2025. This funding has directly benefited my constituents and is a boon for expanding access to NRCS assistance to new producers across the country. How would that $30 million increase access to NRCS assistance? And can you give some specific examples of success stories in that funding, and what more needs to be done in order to expand access to conservation services to producers who have not historically received NRCS assistance?
I'm going to turn to the chief in just a second, but let me just say we use partnership agreements across everything we do. It's a vital tool that we use to connect with all different types of producers. You know the history related to our underserved producers. You know the special needs to be able to do outreach in that community to build trust, to get them in the door. It's not just tweaking programs. It's doing outreach. It's engagement. The chief has worked really hard to get new customers in the door. Chief, let me turn to you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bishop, this has been a tremendous boost in the arm for NRCS and the people around the country that are participating in this. 2 years ago, we did $50 million. Last year, $70 million, and so it's $120 million. And from this, we've seen over 1,200 local events happen from these. We've reached almost 75,000 new customers through these equity agreements, and we've hosted close to 700 workshops. And we've seen about 9,000 individuals participate. What we've seen is that we're out there in those communities helping folks that have never participated before. And when you talk about conservation technical assistance, that is something that is very important because sometimes you have to make 2 or 3 trips back to that same customer to talk with them to get them to understand what's happening there. And from that, we saw over 1,000 new folks sign up for NRCS programs through that operation. So it's been a tremendous success. We have a lot of folks that are participating. And then the other thing is those community-based organizations, those organizations out there, they have the trust of those communities. A lot of times when we go out to talk to folks, we don't have that trust. But when we're working through community-based organizations, it works. And so it's been tremendous. It's a tremendous success. And just think about the conservation that's going on. And one of the things that we talk about in RCS, every acre counts, no matter where it is.
Thank you very much. My time has expired, and I thank the chairman for his generosity.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady from Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel and to Mr. Ducheneau for being here today. I know you are very well aware of the drought disaster that we suffered last year in Louisiana. Last month, when Secretary Vilsack appeared before this subcommittee, I asked him if the administration would consider using its authority to include drought as adverse weather for farm-raised fish in the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program. I'm really grateful to you and your team for working with my team on this, and I was told that the administration may have an update on when we can expect a decision on this. Can you fill us in, please?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the work your team has put in to help us work towards a solution. It's kind of hot. So as we look at ELAP, it's one of the best tools that we've got for mitigating disasters that aren't planned for in our other disaster programs. And crawfish in your state were impacted by the weather. One of the challenges that we have is trying to rationalize drought with a creature that lives under the water. So we're looking at the flexibility in there. We think we found a way through excessive heat to qualify that. We look forward to continuing that conversation with your staff so that we can get across the line on a solution to help those producers.
That's exciting news. My constituents are hammering with me for a timeline on this. Can you give me a specific timeline, specific date that I can get back to them with?
I will get back to you with an answer next week.
Next week. Okay, that's exciting news. I look forward to it. All right. Ms. Bunger, I'd like to take you back to 2022's harvest season in my district, where producers suffered 18 to 22 inches of rain when their crop was ready for harvest. What we learned at that time was that many of my farmers with revenue insurance policies were subject to extreme risk through discounting, leaving many of my constituents and your policyholders without the risk management they believed that they were purchasing. I'd like to thank you for equipping a good regional staff and others who've been working with my farmers to study this issue. However, it's my understanding that RMA is supposed to be performing a review of discount factors related to quality adjustments on revenue policies. I believe this was announced to us in June of 2022. Can you give me an update on how this is going and when we can expect to see progress made on addressing the quality loss issues?
Thank you for the question. Since 2018, the Farm Bill required that RMA look at quality loss option issues. And so since that time, we have incorporated 20 crops that have that quality loss option issue. We currently are working with a study group and reviewing, the ramifications of what has occurred with the quality loss option feature. And we will continue to evaluate quality loss option issues. Currently, with the growers that I have talked to from your state, they have also spoken directly to me. As a soybean grower myself in South Dakota, there are years that it's very droughty, but yet there's also years that it's wet. And so I can appreciate quality loss and the features that we currently have for soybeans. But I know that they have spoken to us around some additional concerns at the elevators where they are marketing their soybeans, and sometimes there's a lack of consistency applied when their crops are sold. And so some of those things we can't always address when it is that transaction between that producer and that elevator. But yet at the same time, we will continue to look at the study, but yet we will also continue to talk with those producers so that we can get to a reasonable goal.
Thank you. I hope you remain committed to that. I have one big quick follow-up. I understand the RMA recently implemented a tropical storm index policy. Can you tell me how the rollout and adoption of this new policy has gone?
It has been extremely successful. We've received a significant amount of wonderful feedback. And with any pilot, though, there are hiccups and bumps and challenges, and we continue to talk to those individuals and help them try to understand what the current policy looks like, and to also encourage AIPs, crop insurance agents, to have really good discussions. As a former crop insurance agent myself, I can appreciate and I understand the ramifications when that policy is not explained to a producer. And then when the loss occurs, it's like, how come I'm not getting paid?
Right.
So, it's probably more than just one answer to look at those challenges. But at the same time, we've started to get feedback. The success of the program was really huge after Hurricane Idalia, where we paid out over $80 million in losses. But yet there was still some individuals that were outside of that parameter. And I know they've expressed some concerns around rain gauges and those kinds of things. We work diligently with NOAA, who is the governing body of those rain gauges. And so we try to make sure that they also take a look at the possibilities of errors and miscalculations. And so sometimes on the backside, when agents are impatiently asking for those payments to their producers, we also, remind them NOAA is processing to make sure those payments are right. But at the end of the day, it's a pilot, and we are very welcomed of the feedback that we're getting, and we'll continue to work with those industry folks to improve a pilot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've gone over. My apologies, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, and thank all of you for being here. I apologize if this question is redundant and was covered in your testimony, but and for being late. But let me ask you, and I'm not sure if this would be addressed to you, Secretary Bonnie, or whomever, but let me just start by thanking you, first of all, for improving equity in farming and improving access to and resources for all farmers, especially black farmers. Black farmers, as you know, have endured decades of discriminatory USDA policies that deny them actual access to financial resources such as loans and grants and other forms of assistance. Now, despite these efforts, though, according to, this was a press report of USDA loan data, Black and Asian identifying farmers were the least successful in acquiring a direct loan and found that USDA granted direct loans only 36% to Black farmers compared to 72% for white farmers. And so how does FSA's proposed legislative changes help Black farmers who have been the most negatively impacted by a long history of discrimination in federal ag policy? And would these changes actually help address the high rejection and withdrawal rates that we see among Black farmers? And the second part of that is just, what is USDA doing to better support the development of young and beginning farmers, many of whom are Black farmers? And how would your proposal revise, and you have this definition of beginning farmers, how would it help more folks who are socially and economically disadvantaged? Thank you all again.
I'm going to ask Zach to respond to that.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's good to see you again. You know, if you look at the legislative proposals that we've got in the president's 25 budget, you'll see that there are some that are holdovers from the 23 budget, some were added in the 24 budget, and finally we've arrived at the full slate in the 25 budget. And they're part of a holistic examination that we're conducting of the way we conduct farm loans. When you have challenges with statutes that put unnecessary barriers in front of young, beginning, less economically mature producers, for whatever reason, it falls heavier on the small, the beginning, the underserved producers.
Which happen to incidentally be quite disproportionately Black.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And Native American.
Yeah.
And I come from a background of working with producers to help access programs. These legislative proposals will help knock down a lot of those barriers and give our producers the pathway they need to get into the program. And it does tie directly to the cooperative agreements that my friend Chief Cosby and Undersecretary Bonnie talked about. Having someone at the table with you as you try to navigate these things is often very helpful, and it's often key to getting in the door. What our legislative proposals hope to do in a holistic way with regulatory changes that are coming and with policy changes and enhancements that we've made, like the online loan application, reduction of the number of pages in the loan application, is to streamline access for producers so that they know where they stand before we go into our decision-making process. Because if we don't do this transparently in a way that they can understand it and see the reasons why, we've done them a disservice. So our work is part of a broader slate of reforms. We'd be glad to visit with your staff and share those more in depth, and we should have a new regulatory framework coming out directly.
Why is this taking so long, though? This has been going on for decades, since the beginning of time.
Yes, ma'am. We have producers call me every day asking that very question because I want to know about this. I come from a background in the farm financial crisis. So there is nothing that I'm going to do in my career that's more important than this. But the unfortunate answer is you cannot fix in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years what has taken 60 years to do, or 100 years to do, or centuries to do. So we're working within our resources to help improve the tools to the staff in the field so they know they're going to be trusted to better exercise their discretion to get folks in the door, instead of where we find ourselves far too often is using discretion to close that door on people.
Yeah, but what you're using, though, are old ways of trying to break down these systemic barriers that have been here since the end of, at least with African Americans being enslaved. so you have to have new ways of doing this, which don't take another, I mean, people pass away. Generations have had to deal with this over and over and over again. So I can't understand why you're using the old ways of addressing these barriers.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would love to share with you more about what we're doing and explain to you how we're changing the way that we're doing it fundamentally.
Thank you,
Welcome that
Mr. Chairman, and
conversation.
then I'll talk to you about the beginning farmer definition later, because
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
another meeting.
Thank
to
you.
go to. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Ducheneau, I'd like to continue with you for a little bit on Farm Service Agency matters. And when I talk to my ranchers, growers, and producers in Central Florida, the topic that comes up more than anything else is the struggle that they have with FSA. And it's not FSA in and of itself. I mean, they love the people who are there. They just continue to tell me that this is a group that's overwhelmed. They're understaffed, they're overworked, good people are quitting. In many cases, these are people who grew up in the ag in the world. They love it. They want nothing more than to continue to give back to the industry. But they're just throwing their hands up and in many cases going other places. And it's just perpetuating the problem that we have. A year ago when Secretary Vilsack was here, I asked him about this and asked a number of questions, and he asked if we would collect data and submit that to him. We did last September in a letter with a whole laundry list of questions. We got an answer back on that 2 days before he testified to us. And he did reiterate at the time, just I think it was last month, that according to all of FSA's metrics, USDA is basically fulfilling the requirements and the needs for the growers and the farmers. That's just not what I hear back home. I was just with a Farm Bureau group Saturday, and I shared with them what the Secretary had mentioned. And sadly, it was all laughter throughout the crowd, and not in a humorous kind of way, but kind of skepticism. We've got problems, and there seems to be a disconnect. One of the questions that we had asked, and the letter I sent back last fall, was that in 2018, USDA conducted an optimal productive office study to enhance the agency's understanding of staffing requirements, particularly in response to producer applications following natural disasters. That tends to be our problem in Florida. It's not a lot of the plug-and-play programs. It's the unique things in the aftermath of storms. Do you know what that study determined? We've not ever really found out what the optimal number should be, and is there an effort to staff to that number?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Franklin, and I owe you an apology. You did what I asked people to do and email me directly, and I dropped the ball on that letter in September, so my apologies for that. Yes, we continue to do analysis of the workload on our field offices, and the fact of the matter is, in every year since 2018, our staff have delivered an additional Farm Bill's worth of programs without any additional staff. We've done twice the work with the same number of staff, which speaks volumes for the dedication of the staff out in the countryside, and puts them in an unfortunate position and puts us in the unfortunate position as their leadership of having to exploit their passion for the work. And that shouldn't be the case. We should be able to have a conversation with employees that would lead them to want to stay in the agency. And part and parcel of that is being able to say, we're going to be able to pay you a reasonable cost of living increase next year and continue to help with the student loan repayment programs. Continuity of care, just like it is in healthcare, is important for our farmers out in the countryside. And if someone across the table from you at the FSA knows the history of your operation, they're going to be much better equipped to help you as these uncertainties arise from the natural disasters that your producers experience.
If I could jump in, and I appreciate that, and I know we're limited on time, but as my colleague and fellow Floridian, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, is fond of saying, budget reflects your priorities. When I look back over FSA's budget for personnel over the last 3 years, it's essentially flat. I understand. My understanding under the Farm Bill, you're not limited in specific headcount of FTEs. It would suggest to me that you're content with the number of folks that you have. It doesn't appear that you're asking for more money, and this is really an effort to understand, because this is bipartisan in my delegation and folks I talk with across the aisle that deal with ag issues across the country. We're scratching our heads trying to figure out, why can we not get more people here? Is this a priority for FSA? Because as your mission statement says, you're a customer-driven agency. The customers aren't real happy right now.
Thank you for the question. You'll see that in our FY25 proposal, we did request a $37 million increase, and we did have increases requested in '24 for staffing, but we did not receive.
That wouldn't even cover the cost of living increase, really. I mean,
I agree.
so the effect, though, is you're not going to have more people next year based on the budget. You may pay the ones you have a little more, but you're going to have attrition, and you're not going to have the budget to replace them. So I don't see this problem getting fixed anytime soon. But I would love to, I want to work with your office. It's a high priority. Representative Soto, my counterpart in adjacent district, we're working on a bill together that works on FSA issues. We really, really want to improve this. That's our goal here.
Welcome the opportunity to discuss that with you, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, just, we welcome the conversation. I also want to say one of the things we've done in Florida to help those producers is jump teams of additional staff to help, particularly in the wake of the hurricane and other things. I think that's a temporary solution, but
If
we're,
I could, and Mr.
Yeah,
Chair, I'm sorry,
please.
just indulge me for a couple seconds. The feedback I get there is, while that's appreciated, these folks come in not understanding the nuances of dealing in a hurricane aftermath, and the very understaffed folks that are there to help have to spend time training them up to figure out what's going on, and then in 3 weeks they're gone. Didn't really help the situation, and now the folks who were there are just farther behind. So it's well intended, but it doesn't work. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We welcome such a distinguished panel, and I apologize I couldn't be here earlier, just too many things at the same time. Gosh, I have so many questions. Can't get them all in. First one is, any help you could give us in our part of the country, the Great Lakes region, and I know that Chief Cosby knows this area very well, having spent a great deal of his time in Ohio. This is just Lake Erie, the southernmost of the lakes, and one of our growing industries is controlled environmental agriculture. It is so exciting. It is so exciting to see this happening. Coming from the Midwest, where we lost a lot of production to subsidized water in other parts of the country, we are now seeing that our fresh water really matters even more. Our problem is, if we have a greenhouse, let's say that's 100 acres undercover, and it could be 1,000 acres undercover, 40% of the bottom line is energy. Any help you can give us in order to expand this industry in our region will be greatly appreciated, especially in the area of energy and material science, so that we can have the very best production chambers and do the best for the environment and do the best for our farmers. So that's an ask. If anyone wants to comment after you can do that now, or I can ask my other two questions, and then we'll just wait for answers. Number two, harmful algal blooms. This same region of the country, Lake Erie's turning into a swamp because of dissolved reactive phosphorus. We've got to find a way to control this. We have not found it. But my question really is, a brilliant farmer came up to me the other day and said, Congresswoman, you're testing in the wrong place. You're testing in the lake. That's the drain. You need to look at the soil, because something's happened to the soil since the mid-1990s, and it cannot capture dissolved reactive phosphorus like it used to. Why is that? And he's a successful farmer. He's corn, soybeans, which we grow a lot of in our area, and he really got me thinking about the chemistry of soils. I know you do a lot on regenerative agriculture. Any thoughts there would be appreciated on what more we could do to get to the bottom of why we are getting all these additional algal blooms. And the Great Lakes did not freeze over for the first time in world history, I guess, this past year. So temperature has something to do with it, too. But that's not the only reason. And finally, the future. For our young farmers, I view USDA in a strange way, that all of the support for food in cities comes through 75% of the resources of USDA go into nutrition. And that's the other side of USDA. Production gets about 25%. Well, that's an old idea, a couple hundred years old, I guess, I don't know. But how do we get more production agriculture where most people live? We just did a survey in our office. We asked people what they wanted more of in our community. I was a little surprised. Among the top 3, people want more roadside stands with local produce, locally grown produce. We're in a part of the world where God makes that possible. So what are you doing to link the production part of agriculture to the vast populations that need nutrition? How do you look at that? Energy, dissolved reactive phosphorus, and more production where people live.
So I'm going to take the first and the third. I'm going to hand the Western Lake Erie Basin piece down to the chief, who I know knows that well. We've got a new Center for Urban and Innovative Agriculture in USDA. It's in NRCS, but it serves the whole department. And we're beginning to look at tools that we can develop for controlled environment agriculture. There's a new controlled environmental agriculture crop insurance pilot right now that has just rolled out. And as you know, there's a big research component on CEA that is different part of USDA, but a lot of investments on the research side for CEA, some around energy. So there's a lot around energy efficiency going on. Happy to make connections there for you.
We'd appreciate that.
On the third question, that same office, that same new office is doing a lot on urban ag, and we call it urban ag, but it's really small scale ag. A lot of rural communities that want to do the same type of thing. The chief can help build high tunnels and support many of those producers. Marcia's program, Whole Farm Revenue, can help support those folks. So we're developing a set of tools for them. There's more work to do, and we need to engage with those producers more. Chief, let me hand it to you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the question. It's good to see you. And as you know, I spent the 16 years as state conservationist in Ohio, and Lake Erie Basin was the top of my priority when I was there. One of the things that we found is that the legacy phosphorus issue that the soil stores there, we got to do a better job. One of the things that we're celebrating here this year is the 125-year anniversary of the soil survey, and it is really important. I think that website gets more hit than any other in the country when you start looking at people that use that information on the soil survey. But we got to do a better job of soil testing, and through some of our programs we're doing that. Also, we have to look at the best practices, the BPMs that could help with that. And I know we're working very closely with EPA on a lot of those, especially in some of their programs. We're looking at cover crops and no-till and some of those type things. One of the main things is that we have to get some type of practice on every acre. That is going to help us solve a big part of this. And when we're talking about application, you know, we look at the 4 R's, the right time, the right place, the right amount, the right source. That's really important because that soil test is going to tell us that. And then so when we work with producers, we have to take that soil test and use it to the maximum ability to know what should be applied, how much can you apply, do you really need it? And by doing that, you're actually putting money back into the producer's pocket when they don't have to apply that, or they don't have to make that trip across the field, because that causes other problems like compaction and some of those type things. So what it boils down to is a conservation plan. We need to be on those farms. We need to be working with those producers. Every producer should have some type of conservation plan that talks about their resources, because every farm is different, every soil type is different, every land use is different, and so we need to be able to write that prescription for that farm and present that to that landowner for consideration. And I think we could change a lot of things there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gentlelady from Iowa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to our panel of witnesses, thank you so much for being here today to discuss the budget request. And I look forward to working with you to help deliver these great products to our farmers, our ranchers, our growers back home in Iowa. I want to echo what you said, Mr. Undersecretary, about the importance of crop insurance. That is absolutely critical to a state like mine, where we've had a devastating derecho, you know, with 140-mile-an-hour winds come through one year, and then 2 years later, it's extreme drought, right? So we have both sides of that as well. So we'll be working very hard to get those programs reauthorized and funded. In Iowa, I want to talk about biofuels because that's a really important part of our local economy. Our consumers, obviously, our drivers have been able to really leverage ethanol blends for years to not only have a lower carbon, but a lower cost option at the pump as well. Sustainable aviation fuel promises really to be the next opportunity for our farmers to be able to produce a clean and reliable fuel. So yesterday, the long-awaited GREET model came out from the administration, as you're all aware, outlining the life cycle carbon reduction for biofuels to determine which feedstocks and fuels are eligible for levels of tax incentives under the new SAF tax credit. So while the revision of GREET could reward farmers for their great conservation practices, I am concerned about the bundling. That's the requirement of kind of an all or nothing approach. I think that could essentially disadvantage many farmers who are not able to implement multiple forms of conservation, meaning they're not rewarded for many of the practices that they do implement to reduce their carbon scores. So, Mr. Undersecretary, what factors led to the administration's decision here to require that bundling of those conservation practices under the revised GREET model?
Representative Hinton, your points are well taken. We obviously think sustainable aviation fuel's a critical opportunity for U.S. agriculture, and U.S. agriculture is going to be really good at it. Yesterday was an important step forward, but a step forward. It's a foundation for a longer game. The important steps were we made significant progress on indirect land use in the model that will be helpful to U.S. producers. That I think will benefit Iowa corn growers, Iowa soybean growers. We importantly got climate smart agriculture into the GREET model in a way that will allow us to open the door to get credit for the types of stewardship practices that your producers have been doing for a long time and will continue to do. And we did some important work on traceability to be able to track low carbon intensity corn and soybeans through the supply chain. We need to have a future where we look at more flexibility, the ability to draw not just bundled practices, but different practices, not just corn and soybeans, but canola and a whole range of other practices. USDA is committed to continuing to work with the interagency team as we move forward. You'll see more of us going forward on this. Again, we look at 40B as a foundation, as an important stepping stone. We've got more work to do.
So kind of a follow-up there, I just would be kind of looking for the upcoming guidance on the 45Z tax
That's right.
credit. Are you anticipating that this bundling requirement will apply there, or are you looking at making some changes?
Well, obviously, at the end of the day, it's Treasury's rule. We're heavily engaged. As you know, the Secretary and our entire team engaged on this. We think we'll have time to provide more flexibility, more opportunities there. We're going to work with our interagency partners to do that, and we think USDA could play a really important role here on things like traceability and other places.
Great. Well, that's good to hear, and I look forward to working with you. And
Please.
I asked the Secretary about it when he was here a couple weeks ago, so I know Secretary Vilsack well, being a fellow Iowan. So we'll stay in touch on that
Please.
because that is absolutely critical for the markets and the competitiveness too, because we are competing against many other people who are trying to do the same thing. So I certainly understand that. I want to talk a little bit about kind of building on my colleague from Florida's line of questioning about FSA and NRCS offices as well. I had a chance last year to visit one of those offices and like walk through with the staff what their daily work looks like. And they're doing a great job. Like, they're working very hard. You mentioned that, they're kind of really doing more with less, 2 times the output and the same people. So I was very glad to see that your budget request maintained the funding for the FSA to modernize information technology systems and simplify the application process there. So Administrator Ducheneau, can you share an update on your work to really modernize that technology? Because I was watching them take their cards from one machine to another. I mean, it was a workflow, not like if I was coming in a workflow situation, it looked like a complete nightmare to me.
Yes, I think we've got that matter resolved. Thank you for your observation of that. The work we're doing with IT modernization is really exemplified by what our farm loan program team has been able to do since we've been able to finally secure our contract to carry out the IT roadmap that has been ready to go for 5 years. Then we have to go through a fairly protracted contracting process that includes appeals from contractors that don't get the awards, and that presents challenges with regard to the availability of appropriations that really put us in a challenging spot as it pertains to innovating. We've taken a look at the needs, heard the concerns of producers all across the country, and are working to address that. You'll see our new loan assistance tool, our online application, valuable tools for producers. We're working on an aspect of that for guaranteed loan programs, so lenders can have access to those same type of portals. And we're also working with cooperators in our ecosystem of cooperators to help stand up tools for producers so they have access to some digital resources so they're more prepared when they get to our office. So it's making better use of everybody's time.
Yeah, streamlining is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
And I will follow up with a question for the record on cybersecurity, because I think that's another aspect, but I'll submit that later. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ranking Member. I appreciate all you guys being here today to talk about your upcoming fiscal year asks. I want to ask about something specific, and maybe I'm not from the South, but Mr. Ducheneau, I think is how you say your name, I've heard. One of the FSA programs for tree fruit producers uses financial assistance. It's called TAP, the Tree Assistance Program. You're shaking your heads, you all know about that. Several years ago, the state committee designated losses to the X disease phytoplasma or little cherry disease as eligible natural disaster in the state of Washington. The infection reduces fruit size and quality and kills the tree over several years, but once identified in a tree, it's important the tree is removed as soon as possible to reduce the spread of the disease. FSA's current process for TAP doesn't seem to be a good fit for losses resulting from LCD, or little cherry disease. The program requires a physical inspection to verify the loss and the reasons for the loss. Typically, producers can't wait for an inspector before removing the trees, nor would an inspector want to make that many frequent visits. As we talked about, the manpower just isn't there. Moreover, the little cherry disease is confirmed by a laboratory test and may not be evident upon initial physical inspection. Stopping the spread of the disease requires a community-wide effort, as you know, and producers often, as they should, remove the inspected trees before an inspector can arrive. Unfortunately, they're frequently denied then assistance under TAP. So it seems like there needs to be a better process here for TAP to address this a unique but unfortunately a huge problem in my district for producers who are effectively being penalized for doing the right thing. And so I think there's some things that we could do here, but can you tell me what prevents FSA from relying on maybe a certified test as a qualifier for TAP? And just looking mainly for your commitment to review, evaluate, look at what we could do to try to fix this process so that we could make it better. My understanding is it doesn't take legislation. It might be just a simple regulatory fix.
Thank you, Mr. Newhouse, for the question. You know, I had a chance to visit with the folks at the American Blueberry Council here a few months ago here in town, and they shared some concerns with the tree assistance program as well, talking about how the price for replacement of trees and things haven't kept up with the times. And I will commit to work with your staff to find solutions within our existing statutory authority. But want to point out that we are under an obligation to demonstrate effective stewardship of taxpayer resources. So that testing is required for certifying that the loss happened. Maybe there's a way we can do it through sampling or something like that. We'll definitely work with your staff to find some solutions.
Yeah, it seems like we could come up with something. My district in Eastern Washington, famous for Washington apples, we've got to get that in there. But certainly as well, we have one of the highest concentrations of CRP land outside of the Texas area. Conservation in Douglas County, Washington, has for years been hindered by the 25% county acreage cap. So could you talk about some alternative methods that might be available for Douglas County to reduce the cap by utilizing other FSA programs? What would it take to get this done? Does there need to be an agreement between USDA and Washington State Conservation Commission, or maybe Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife?
I believe there's a statutory cap on acreage within a county, sir, but there are other conservation programs such as those that are available through the NRCS that could help accelerate conservation in Douglas County. I know we've seen the request from Douglas County a couple different times to try to waive that. The statute is pretty prescriptive in when we can do that. So we will continue to work towards solutions to help your producers.
And just to pile on to the staffing issue, if I could real quickly, my understanding is it takes an average of 80 days to onboard a new hire. Used to be 150 years ago, took 80 days to travel around the world. Is there something we can do that would accelerate that process?
Appreciate the question. We've got a new HR team in our business center, and that's one of the highest priorities, is to reduce that time to hire. We've got some new authorities in some parts of FPAC, direct hire and other things that we're deploying, but very high priority for us. We're, even as we have the types of staffing problems that Mr. Franklin talked about, we lose people in the hiring process. So vitally important, happy to follow up with you if there's more interest there.
Good, good. Thank you very much. Again, appreciate all you being here. Good to meet you, Mr. Crosby. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Crosby, I live 2 miles from Mississippi State line, if that makes you feel any better. And I had to Google your county. I thought I knew Mississippi, but you're up there in the sweet potato country, I might add. I think y'all do grow fine sweet potatoes. We get them. Given the drought, and I know Mississippi and, of course, the whole country, we're talking about that here, it's a major concern in Alabama. What specific initiatives is NRC undertaking to support farmers in adopting sustainable conservation practices that address the pressing issue of drought while assuring long-term ag viability?
Mr. Carl, we welcome you to Mississippi anytime that you
All
want to
right.
come across, and we do have good
That's where
sweet
we're going
potatoes.
date night, by the way. We go to Hurley, Mississippi,
All
and
right,
get a hot dog.
okay, all right. And there are several ways to cook a sweet potato. So thank you for that, sir. We last year, over the last few years, we've been the drought has been really bad in certain places, but we've responded to over 80 crises in last year, and we've already responded to 30 this year. And drought is one of those, fire and all those different things that happen across the country. One of the things that I talked about that is critically important is this conservation planning. It's called conservation technical assistance. When we have conservation technical assistance available to us, that is the planning part of this. And that's where we're able to bring in other experts, other partners, and because we can't do this work by ourselves, we have a number of outside partners to help us do this work with the expertise that's needed. And one is through conservation districts and the many other partners that we have. But it starts with this conservation plan because it's just like going to the doctor. We write a prescription for that land. And we walk every acre, we talk about, and we also look at the farmstead and talk about what is needed there. And some of the things is that, maybe a cover crop would work to help with that in drought situations. It might be some areas where you need to even plant some small grains, or an area you might even need to put pasture in. And so, in a lot of these situations, we're talking about a corn soybean rotation. So maybe we need to look at the rotation and figure that out. But I think it starts with the conservation plan, and from that, I think we can develop different things for that producer to maybe look at these drought situations. And, it's happening all over the country.
Well, as you well know, without our farm community, we cease to exist, and we focus on that every day. Undersecretary Bonnie, please tell me how the RMC is treating our oyster farmers. The eligibility for coverage, I guess I should add in there.
So assuming you're thinking about crop insurance here,
I think so.
I might hand it to Marcia.
It's so simple, you're going to hand it to somebody else. It's always a good sign.
Thank you for the question. So this past year, RMA, very committed to specialty crops and growers across the country, we introduced a shellfish policy. So, I can proudly say today that we insure plants in the ground, beasts that walk the earth, and creatures that swim the sea. And so it is a pilot, and as all pilots go, there is a lot to learn from those pilots. But yes, with that shellfish policy, we are now exploring how we can also aid those fishermen in this country. And so would love to hear feedback from you, engage in a conversation if there's more questions around the shellfish policy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a huge issue in my part of the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I return my time.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from California is recognized.
So I want to start with Administrator Bunger. As you know, risk management tools were created to help farmers weather difficult times. For example, the Dairy Revenue Protection Program was designed to ensure against unexpected declines in the quarterly revenue for milk sales. DRP's design makes near-term coverage affordable, but longer-term coverage is prohibitively expensive, even though it's essential to helping dairy farmers manage risk during periods of long-term price declines. However, I understand the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation Board of Directors declined the request to reduce premiums for longer-term coverage. I understand that one of the concerns was that it would introduce unequal treatment, but dairy farmers are relative newcomers to the crop insurance for milk and have long been at a disadvantage when it comes to RMA programs. I'm interested in your thoughts and would like to work with you to determine how we make this program as friendly as possible for dairy farmers.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the feedback. As a lot of our products that we have rolled out in recent times, it has come through the 508H process, and that process involves a private submitter. And so they come to the board, they present their ideas. It takes a number of months, sometimes up to 2 years, for those expert reviewers and conversations. At the end of the day, we still have to abide by statute and have it be actuarially sound. And so those are conversations that RMA welcomes as we then turn around and engage with that private submitter, because we also have to respect their proprietary information with regards to their submission. But, so if we have, especially with beginning farmers, ranchers, that if there are barriers, then we need to work together to overcome them.
So, and another one that it's been brought up to me a couple times is on a dairy farm, and this is obviously my background being a dairy farmer, this is one I understand a little bit better than a lot of other folks here on the Hill. 30 to 50% of our cattle are culled a year annually on a farm. And so beef is a huge part of our income. And we really don't have a program that works for any sort of risk management there. And looking at the CME, the way that they handle cattle, it's usually virgin cattle. And dairy cattle are the exact opposite. They're always bred, they've always had a calf, and they end up going to be culled at a certain point. But it is 30 to 50% of all herds are culled annually. And so it is something that I'd really like to have an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with you and see if there's some opportunity there.
Definitely.
To create something that works for farmers.
Exactly, especially if there is data available, and if it's being traded on the Chicago Board of Trade, we have good pricing analysis that we can draw from. And so I think, of course, of LRP, the Livestock Revenue Program. So if that's something that we can, again, that is also a private product that has come through the board through the 508H, but I welcome the opportunity to have you visit with our staff.
I'd love that. Thank you. And then Mr. Ducheneau, sorry. Disaster assistance. We had some flooding a year ago in California, and I brought it up with the Secretary of Vilsack a few weeks back. There are, again, this happens to just be dairy farmers for some reason, and I brought up the point that in Puerto Rico, in what was it, 2017, under a previous administration, they were able to be of assistance, but I've still got some dairy farmers who I think did everything they possibly could to prevent any real disasters, protect cattle, protect the environment, making sure that water retention basins, nothing was breached and released into waterways. And they're still on the hook for a lot of these resources that were expended, and it seems like either they've run out of money, they don't qualify. I'd really like to see if you've got any answer to this, or if there's an opportunity there we can work together and resolve this as quickly as possible.
There's always an opportunity to work together to improve this. The livestock supporting disaster programs that we have, in the grand scheme of things, are still in their juvenile stage. They first started in 2008, were made permanent in 2014 in the 2012 Farm Bill, and have evolved slightly. And we've found a lot of flexibility in the ELAP program and been supported in getting more producers in we might be able to take a look at that ELAP program. The unique portion of the disaster in Puerto Rico is that there was a statutory authorization that allowed the secretary to get to the CCC money to help there. We don't have that authorization right now. We've got the DIP program, of course,
How
but
did that authorization get removed?
I do not work on that side of this dais, sir. I don't know.
Seems like that's something.
I think it was an authorization just for Puerto Rico.
And how was that created and why did that go
I don't know if it
away?
was written into the 2018 Farm Bill. We can give you more information on
I
it.
think that was done, that disaster was before the 18 Farm Bill. But was the payments after?
We'll get you more information. Happy to.
Glad to work with you on how to help evolve our livestock programs to get around that. I just learned something about dairy today. I didn't realize the cull rate was so high. So look forward to learning more.
Well, and the cull rate, this is one that I think most people don't understand is when you're culling cows, you don't necessarily go to beef. They go to the auction and other dairies might purchase them. Just like a person sells their car, doesn't mean the car goes to the junkyard. Someone else might buy that car and run it for another few thousand miles. And a cow will move to another farm with different levels of production. But ultimately, that cow will sell for cull prices, and that's income that farmers would like some way to hedge. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the witnesses. I represent the Shenandoah Valley, which has been losing farmland since the very beginning of this country. But we continue to lose it at a very fast clip. And so I appreciate the work that you all do. The cost of farming and ranching in America has significantly outpaced the growth in the guaranteed loan size limits at FSA. It's in no small part due to the inflation that's been made worse by the trillions in new spending that we've seen over the last 4 years. But USDA's latest land values report demonstrates an increase of more than 25% increase in cropland prices nationally from 2018 to 2022. Some states saw an increase in cropland prices from 2021 to 2022 of up to 20% alone. And over the same period, the FSA guaranteed loan limits only increased 16%. So in addition to increased prices for farm real estate, the cost of production for U.S. farmers and ranchers has increased significantly too. According to USDA's most recent forecast, production expenses to increase by more than 34% in 2023 compared to the prices paid in 2018 when FSA loan limits were raised in the Farm Bill. So Administrator Ducheneau, I guess there's a long distance between Portugal and France. As you likely know, farm credits have requested an increase in FSA guaranteed ownership loan limits. Specifically, we've received requests for an increase of $500,000, bringing the total to $3.5 million. Can you briefly touch on how an increase would help the agency better serve farmers and ranchers?
Yes, sir, and thanks for the question. So the farm loan relationship with the guarantee lenders is complex because the calls I get nearly every day are from folks who have a guaranteed loan where the risk appetite of the lender is changing in light of economic realities that they're experiencing on a regional or even national scale. And we don't have the tools to help. That's why one of the provisions we put in our legislative proposals is the ability to refinance certain debt so that we can help those producers with our more favorable terms and our larger risk pool. It's important to point out that when the FSA does a direct loan itself, it's got a negative cost to the taxpayer and a negative impact on the budget. So it's important that we advance both of these programs in unison so that they can work better together. Guaranteed loan limits certainly have not kept up with land prices, and that's something that we hear from producers in the countryside virtually everywhere we go. But we hear the same from the young and beginning and startup farmers.
Nobody wants to get into the
$600,000
business.
doesn't get you much done in very many states in the country, and if it does, it's not a production unit.
Can you also talk about the increase in guaranteed operating loan limits to $3 million that are being advocated?
Yeah, I think our numbers are in the billions there. I don't know about the statutory guidance that's coming from the Hill about what those limits might be. I know we've provided some technical assistance on some of those requests. But again, it's critical that if we have the authority to guarantee a loan, we should have the ability to refinance that and give that producer that last best chance with our terms
Right.
to navigate out of that and get back into the marketplace. And that's more of the calls that keep me up at night than anything, is folks that have a guaranteed loan where the lender is concerned and not able to extend the terms despite our guarantee in a way that can make an impact for that producer.
Also want to ask you about rural development. Initially, Farm Credit financed certain rural development projects, hospitals, senior care centers, clinics, through a pilot program authorized by the Farm Credit Administration. The original pilot program at FCA expired in 2014. Can you talk about why that expired, and can you briefly discuss the benefits that, or the analysis of what results you saw from that program, and whether or not Congress should take another look at providing new authority for this type of financing?
A wise man once told me, if you don't know the answer, don't try to give one. I don't know the answer to that question. Farm Credit Administration is a separate entity. I will make sure that we get back to you with some thoughts about that, though, sir.
That's the advice that they give lawyers too. Don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just take this up to a kind of 50,000-foot level and just ask Mr. Bonney, are you the one who prepared the FPAC budget request?
The entire team prepares the budget.
But you approved of the final
course.
budget request, okay. And obviously the secretary probably did too. The president has famously said within the past week that he has reduced the federal debt. I mean, I don't know, this might be Common Core math or something, but it increased by about $7 trillion during his presidency. And Jamie Dimon 3 weeks ago, the JP Morgan Chase CEO, warned about the growing federal debt in his shareholder letter. John Walden, the president of Goldman Sachs, similarly in an interview talked about out-of-control spending as one of his greatest concerns, and the leverage in the Treasury system. And what leverage in the Treasury system, of course, is debt. We're running a deficit of probably close to $3 trillion right now, all of it borrowed. So I have a question. So when you prepared the budget, for instance, in the distressed borrowers program, how much is left unspent in that program?
So we've committed 2.3 billion of 3.1 billion right now.
So there's 800 billion that has not been committed, still left. So was consideration given when you're creating the budget to say, let's subject this to a rescission? I mean, it was, generally the IRS felt to be COVID related. Newsflash, COVID is over. Was there consideration to turning it back to the Treasury to help with the debt and the deficit that leaders in the financial community in America, I think most people would understand Jamie Dimon has a pretty good idea what goes on in the economy. Goldman Sachs, pretty good. Was there consideration to turning that back into the Treasury as part of the budget?
No.
No.
And the
Okay.
IRA resources, of course, were committed in the Inflation Reduction Act. And just like with the chief, those are resources that we have.
But you could have in the budget, is that right?
Sure.
So it's a conscious decision to spend that $800 million despite a $3 trillion deficit and problems with leverage in the Treasury system. So look, I thank you for your honesty. The bottom line is you and I are probably going to disagree about this. That's $800 million of taxpayer dollars, and not even taxpayer dollars. We've got to borrow that money. Taxpayers eventually going to have to pay it back somehow. That we really could, again, subject it to rescission and actually spend it to pay down the debt or deficit. Maybe do things like that. So again, you and I are going to disagree. Going to have to agree to disagree about that. I do worry a little bit that, because I did get complaints in my district from farmers about the idea that you had to belong to certain categories, to get your loan, forgiven. And I always question the policy of why would you pay off 1 year in advance instead of, pay what was owed in arrears, but that farmer might have a good crop next year. I mean, they could make money. So, but that's a policy issue that we're probably going to disagree on. Let me talk about the Emergency Relief Program 2022, because there was a distinct policy change in the administration or in the department between ERP 20 and ERP 21 and then ERP 22, where crop insurance premiums for select beginning and, quote, socially disadvantaged farmers were waived. So my understanding is that USDA only requires self-certification to be, quote, socially disadvantaged. Is that true?
Yes.
Well, in that case, then how does USDA monitor fraud and abuse of, quote, socially disadvantaged claims? Because again, during COVID, we had probably hundreds of billions of dollars of claims paid out by the federal government that were done based on self-certification. So how does the USDA monitor fraud and abuse of, quote, socially disadvantaged claims?
We monitor waste, fraud, and abuse on everything we do across all three agencies, and we have a very low rate of waste, fraud, and abuse.
So how do you do it, particularly in that case? I mean, do you review each application? Do you contact the farmer who is suggesting they are socially disadvantaged? Do you do an investigation into it, or you just assume that most of them are just fine?
I might turn to my agency heads here to talk about their respective agencies.
Thank you for the question. We have significant safeguards in place. We have a system of spot checks where we will pull files and do a deeper review on them so that we can seek, one, to deter such behavior, but two, when we find it, we turn it over to the appropriate agency for enforcement. I think you'll recall back in the first part of 21, there was a producer that was prosecuted for making assertions with regard to CFAP, that they didn't have the animals. And we are very cognizant that there's risk in all of our self-certified programs. We make sure that we are measured in our approach and ensure that we take the appropriate steps when that comes to our attention.
So in this particular case where the definition is, you've been subject to racial, ethnic, or gender prejudice, I mean, that could be pretty widely interpreted. How many of those have you investigated?
Just need to make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about. Section 22006 of the Inflation Reduction Act is not a race-based program. It is based purely on economics. Section 22007 was authorized by Congress and approved to be administered by a third-party agency outside the department. So within Section 22006, we maintain all of those same safeguards. We monitor every cash flow-based application, and we look in detail at every extraordinary measures request. And to your point about the remaining funds, I would like to sit and visit with Jamie Dimon about producer economics, because I think he is missing the mark if he thinks that's a better investment of that $800 million than helping keep producers on the farm.
We've had farmers for many centuries in this country, and we didn't have one of these programs. And somehow those farmers survived, but we have never had a $35 trillion debt and ongoing multi-trillion-dollar deficits outside pandemic or war. And with all due respect, you are probably the expert on farm service, and I won't ask for the English subtitles of all those sections, but Jamie Dimon and John Waldron really are experts on the economy. And all I will say is I'm disappointed by the fact that this administration takes the debt and the deficit so lightly. I get it. An agency gets the appropriation, and it's great. You like spending the money. At some point, somebody has to say this emperor has no clothes. We cannot take $800 million. And $800 million. You sound like you're from Washington. You say, it's not much money. That's almost $1 billion sitting around. That again was intentioned mostly for COVID-related problems. Again, I just think this is just irresponsible in terms of our fiscal situation. Anyway, but I want to thank all of you for being here. By the way, when I asked the staff, I asked the members, well, who would you like to come? They're like, FPAC, that's who we want to have. So I'm going to apologize for them for asking you to take a day off to be here, but your programs are very popular. Mr. Bishop, if you have any closing remarks.
No more second round?
If you have a brief question, I'd be more than happy to, if we can keep it to maybe 2 minutes, one question.
Okay.
Yes. I'm going to exert
I guess I'll
chairman
submit-
discretion
I'll
because I
submit
think,
the others for the
I
record.
think on my side of the aisle, most people understood that we were not going to have one, but since you all braved it out, I'd be more than happy.
Thank you. I have a question for the Risk Management Agency. Georgia's number one in pecans in my district, and it's number one for pecan production in my district. I hear from my growers that they were not able to exclude 2018 and 2019, which were bad revenue years, as a result of Hurricane Michael, from their pecan revenue insurance policies. Is it possible for RMA to fix this and to allow pecan growers to have the same options as other growers, or to have yield exclusion from actual revenue?
Thank you for the question. You know, to get to an answer, we are going to probably have to come back to you with an answer. You know, when I think about yield exclusion and how it works, it typically is determined on a county basis, and it is typically that that county suffered at least a 60% loss of their tea yield. Now, I'm not familiar with how yield exclusion works on pecans, you know, so again, it could be something that we would have to also then research in statute, but more than happy to work with your staff, to have a better understanding and hopefully get to a solution.
Okay, switching gears right quick, and I'll offer something for a couple of questions on forestry for the record. With reference to urban agriculture, the FY25 budget requests $15 million for urban agriculture, which is an increase of $8 million over the enacted budget from last year. This would expand urban agriculture programs, including improved grant opportunities for historically underserved communities. This increased funding request is a welcome sight, as I understand the demand for the program is greatly outpacing funding for the program. How would this funding request help address the unmet urban agriculture need? And since previously available funding has only been able to fund a percentage of the demand, how has NRCS been prioritizing the urban agriculture funding that's received to provide the most benefit to the most recipients possible?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Bishop, and this has been a tremendously popular program. You know, when the Secretary talked about urban agriculture and said, hey, NRCS, would you lead this for the department? It was something that we really wanted to do. I've had a history in this for a lot of years, coming from Ohio and working with Ms. Capter, and then also Congresswoman Fudge when she was there, and looking at Cleveland and just how urban agriculture changes cities, it changes lives, it changes communities. And from that, when we look at the program that we have right now, when we started looking at the grant opportunities through this program, it has been hard, because we started with about $5 million, we went to $7 million, and now we've requested 15 in the president's budget, and we need that really to sustain this program. This year, through our grants program, we had about $5 million available. We had over 650 applications for that. We're only able to fund about 2% of the applications that came in through this. And through those opportunities, folks are looking at, how do we go out and do urban planning? How do we do those type things? How do we do food waste reductions? You know, one of the popular things with this is the food waste reduction, and where food is, you know, from colleges and high schools and from restaurants are being collected, and we're making compost and providing that compost to folks to go out and grow these fruits and vegetables. Because sometime in these urban areas, you got other problems with your soils, you need different amendments and some of those type things. And so it's been very popular. Urban agriculture is growing, is big, and again, every acre counts, no matter where it is. And so we are really happy about what's happening in the urban agriculture space.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to quick touch on a topic that's a major concern to producers in my district, high pathogen avian influenza. We know this is now affecting dairy cattle. It has spread it at a kind of alarming pace, and certainly people are concerned about it. both on the producer side and on the consumer side. I know, obviously, across the spectrum of USDA agencies, you're working on this, and I just kind of wanted to hear your perspective, knowing APHIS's role here. What steps are you all taking to coordinate across the agency to work with our county and state offices on this?
So I'll start. I think obviously all of government coordination right now, White House, CDC, FDA, and USDA right now. So a lot of coordination goes on there. Within the department, one of the pieces we participate indirectly in is use of the Commodity Credit Corporation funding to help with poultry issues related to high-path aviation influenza. So there's we have some responsibilities there. Beyond that, we're always looking for ways that we can think creatively about, can we use, are there authorities that we can use here? Our challenge is most of the disaster programs that Administrator Ducheneau has are linked to drought or some other weather-induced. We have crop insurance obviously linked to yields and weather as well. We'll continue to look at ways, if there are ways that we can use our program, particularly on the livestock side, or there's some things we could think about there. But as of right now, we're not spending our resources on responding to the crisis.
Are you getting many questions from local offices at FSA on this? Because I'm sure people are coming in asking questions.
Yes, and we're encouraging both our staff and our county committees and our state leadership to get out there and listen to the stories of the producers so that we can bring them together. We're having near daily meetings across the department to try to get our arms around the issue and learn more about this. So we're taking all that feedback from producers, and if any of yours have any, please have them reach out to their local office and share their story.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I really want to thank you for a second round. I really, really do. I'm going to go through this real fast. First of all, is the farmers market at the USDA still functional, and is it successful?
Yes and yes.
We worked with Gus Schumacher many years ago to do that, and you're a breath of fresh air. It's all I got to say, because USDA didn't want to do it, and when they saw all the customers, they were looking out the window from the top floor, I thought, see? So thank you for that good news. Number two, livestock, manure. Who could you recommend to me, you don't have to do it now, the best in your department to come out to Ohio and look at part of the problem we have with Lake Erie related to livestock? And can we turn the manure into fuel or into fertilizer? I need the best in America to advise us. Any help there would be greatly appreciated. Number three, from Chief Cosby, with climate change, I'm told that Ohio is now Arkansas. We're supposed to be planting millions of trees in Ohio and Michigan, 20 million actually. If you could give us a recommendation on which trees, we would sure appreciate it, because we're a little uncertain on what to plant. I share a point of view with Congresswoman Hinson in terms of biofuels. We flew the first biofueled F-16 fighter jet out of the 180th Fighter Squadron in Western Ohio, right in this watershed, 25 years ago, and it was successful. We need to talk to the best plant scientists you have so we know which plants we put in for the least BTU output for the greatest the least BTU input for the greatest BTU output. We don't know what that is yet. We're using corn and beans because it's what we know how to do. But anybody you could tell us to work with to be higher up on the scale of plant science, we're very interested in Ohio. Finally, to Chief Cosby, Sister Jeremiah Stinson and Sister Grace Allen send their good wishes to you, and they have published a little document called Functional Equilibrium of Soils, and they are very worried about the fact that we are not really intelligently understanding what is happening with soil science, and it is the reason we can't control dissolved reactive phosphorus, because it isn't just soil testing, it's soil science. And that something has happened post-mid-1990s with applicants on the land that may be affecting the slush underneath where the roots are absorbing or not absorbing what they should. And they're thinking that it's much more complicated than soil testing. So I just wanted to share that with you. And if there's anybody at the department that has knowledge of that, I would be very grateful in having a Zoom with them and some of the folks from back home as we try to figure out what is happening in the soil. We even have one farmer, and I'll end with this, who went to Mayo Clinic and hired a soil scientist, excuse me, a pharmacologist from there, and he spells it Pharmacologist, pharmacologist, because the carrots he's raising today in Huron, Ohio, have half the nutrients that his father got in 1950. So there's something going on in the soil that we need to understand, and I simply don't have the people out in my area who are facile in this. So any help there would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member.
Thank you very much. Let me just ask one question about the Commodity Credit Corporation. And within FPAC, Mr. Bonney, are you currently planning to use Section 5 of the Commodity Credit Corporation Charter Act for additional funding for partnerships for climate-smart commodities or any other activity this fiscal year?
No, we're not.
Okay, I'm going to thank you for the you know, the candidness with it, and we're going to hold you to that because again, I just think that we should use that only on authorized expenditures. Anyway, with that, Mr. Bishop, do you have any closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In closing, it's important to remember that the primary functions we have as members of Congress is to ensure that our federal government works for and in behalf of all Americans. Every one of us has dedicated caseworkers on our staff who help us serve our constituents. And I know that USDA has really worked with my staff to resolve many of our constituent cases, and they've been responsive and timely. There are hundreds of thousands of people in each district, so USDA staff is often stretched very, very thin. And I just want to ensure that they have the resources that they need to adequately meet the needs of our farmers and our stakeholders and the American people. Thank you again for your service and for your testimony here today. We look forward to working with you and with our colleagues to address the concerns and to implement some of the great ideas that have been raised here today, and we hope that we can work cooperatively together to actually work and produce a product that will be working for and in behalf of the American people through the People's Agency, the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. And I want to follow on with what the ranking member said. I have a mostly agricultural district. You would think that in that district, most of the complaints with the federal bureaucracy would concern agriculture, but they don't. You should be proud of that. It concerns getting passports. It concerns the VA. It concerns Medicare. It concerns but I don't get a whole lot of problems, from complaints about the interaction with the USDA. So, and the FSA, is the kind of the face of the FSDA in the communities. I want to thank them for that. And I know you have limited resources, but you must be doing a great job because, again, we measure it by what our constituents say to us, and they overwhelmingly like the way the USDA and especially the FSA is reaches out into the community. Anyway, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. I think our discussion touched on many important issues that resonate with our nation's producer and our constituents across rural America. I look forward to working with you as we move through our FY25 process. And as a reminder, if members would like to submit questions for the record, please submit those to the subcommittee staff within 7 days. The subcommittee stands adjourned.